Okay, so we're still talking about the Saturn Conjunct North Node in history, what it signified. I just went on to the discovery for the, let's say, John von Neumann's first draft of a report which led to the development of the computer. Let's jump to October 1956, when this conjunction was at 0 degrees of Sagittarius. Now, apparently the Protocol of Sèvres, a secret agreement between Israel, France, and the United Kingdom, is signed, allowing the former to invade Suez Canal, the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, and occupy the Suez Canal with the support of the other two governments, which gave rise to the Suez Canal crisis. And what do we see now with Yemen? Another crisis in that part of the world. Why do Israel need Gaza so badly? So they can build another canal, which is an alternative to the Suez Canal. So this directly ties us to the Suez Canal crisis, and we can see parallels in what's going on now, right? There was also a British, French-Israeli invasion of Egypt in 1956. Israel invaded on the 29th of October, having done so with a primary objective of reopening the Straits of Tiran and the Gulf of Aqaba as the recently tightening of the 8-year-long Egyptian blockade further prevented Israeli package. So we see Israeli aggression backed by Western powers because of actions of other Arab nations in the area. So they're doing it for economic reasons, but okay, I guess it belies other reasons. Very important, I mentioned there were 3 occasions when communism was under threat, or there was a big fight back. This is another year. There was the Hungarian Revolution, which broke out against the pro-Soviet government, originating as a student demonstration in Budapest, and Hungary tried to leave the Warsaw Pact. Hungarian Revolution, 1956, more Soviet troops invaded Hungary and they crushed the revolt that started. Thousands killed, nearly 250,000 leave the country. This is kind of important. Events in Eastern Europe, but here a fight back, but it's crushed. How could that reflect going forward? But it's very interesting. We also had another pivotal event in the Israel area, the Khan Yunis massacre. Israeli soldiers shoot dead hundreds of Palestinian refugees and local inhabitants in Khan Yunis camp. Interesting, because a lot of people will refer back to that and say, you know, the violence is not unprecedented. There are so many times it's gone this way, it's gone that way. You know, it's which came first, the chicken or the egg. Didn't start on October 7 kind of thing. Also, the world's first industrial-scale commercial nuclear plant is opened at Calder Hill in UK. That becomes relevant again as well. Now, on April the 5th, 1968, the conjunction is in Aries, and we have, I mentioned it before, the assassination of Martin Luther King. He's shot dead at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, by James Earl Ray. And the King assassination causes riots. They erupt in American cities. He is another kind of misrepresented figure. We're giving this wonderful image of him as someone, he was a hardcore communist. All his speeches were written by a guy called Epstein. This whole speech about I care not about the character of him, it's out of context. It's not really who he was. It's constantly quoted to make him look some sort of hero. He was a degenerate. He had bad moral standards in his own life. There's a whole story about him. Basically, no hero. Now, this I find incredibly interesting. Listen to this. You in the UK, I don't think I need to explain more. Conservative British politician Enoch Powell made his controversial Rivers of Blood speech in Birmingham, deploring the effects of immigration. He's dismissed from the shadow cabinet the following day. Well, I don't think I need to say more about the relevance of that. For you South Africans, South African Airways Flight 228, a Boeing 707, crashed shortly after takeoff, killing 123 people. I mentioned that because my mom knew someone involved in that. Also, I mentioned the nuclear plant. America had its most serious nuclear accident. It was the 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania, their most serious nuclear accident ever. Theme of nuclear going on with the other nuclear plant. We will look for other things. You know, they're constantly talking about Chernobyl and it being attacked during this Russia-Ukraine conflict. There were the Paris riots, 1 million march through the streets of Paris. So again, we hear this echo, riots in Paris, that echoes to a previous time we just mentioned when Saturn was conjunct the North Node. In the United States Congress repeals the requirement for a gold reserve to back UK currency. I mentioned that in previous broadcasts. I've talked about synchronicities between planets now and planets in 1971 when Nixon, I think Pluto moved into Libra when Nixon got rid of the gold standard. And here we again allude to it. Hasn't Trump talked about going back to, backing the currency with gold? It's interesting from that point of view. two occasions in history when it links to planets, and now it's coming to the fore. Obviously, this period, Vietnam War, Battle of Lima Site, the largest single ground combat loss of the United States Air Force during this time. It was also a secret war later known as the Laotian Civil War. American troops also killed scores of civilians. The story becomes public in November and undermines public support for the Vietnam War. I wonder if there'll be some sort of American loss of life in Vietnam. It's going to wake people up. In Ukraine, it's going to wake people up. Also, the first Battle of Saigon ended. There was the Battle of Khe Sanh, one of the most publicized and controversial battles of the war begins. We have this war theme again. It's also one of these strange proxy wars America was involved in, isn't it? Vietnam, and it was one over which there was huge protests. So maybe we'll begin to see protests against Ukraine happening in America. I mentioned the fight back against communism. This year, the Warsaw Pact invasion of Czechoslovakia. The Prague spring of political liberalization ends as 750,000 Warsaw Pact troops and 6,500 tanks with 800 aircraft invade Czechoslovakia. It was the largest military operation in Europe since the end of World War II, basically crushed the uprising in Czechoslovakia. I know John Waters wrote a song saying you can crush the flowers, but you can't stop the spring about that. Interesting. The semiconductor company Intel is founded in what becomes known as Silicon Valley. 3 links now to Saddam Hussein. On this first time he's mentioned, Saturn Conjunct, the North Node, he becomes vice chairman of the Revolutionary Council in Iraq after a coup. There's also here the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. Senator Robert F. Kennedy was leading a 1968 Democratic presidential election fight. He shot at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, and it was apparently a Palestinian-born Sirhan, but I think he wasn't really. There's more to that story, as they are with all these assassinations. Also, Joseph Bachmann tries to assassinate Rudi Dutch, leader of the left-wing movement, APO in Germany. Will we see one of the AfD people shot? Who else are we going to see assassinated potentially this year? Interesting to know. Let's hop to July 10, 1979, with the conjunctions in Virgo. James Callaghan, minority Labour government, loses a motion of no confidence. Is that alluding to what we're saying about Starmer? Could they find a way to get rid of him? The Soviet Union covertly launches its invasion of Afghanistan. 3 days later, PDPA General Hafizullah Adman is executed in Operation Storm. So all problems in that particular area. And the first European Ariane rocket is launched, so it's kind of a space thing. There were also, here's the link to Iran. After false radio reports from the Ayatollah Khomeini that the Americans had occupied the Grand Mosque in Mecca, the United States Embassy in Islamabad is attacked by a mob, set afire, killing 4 and disturbing the Pakistan-United States relationship. November, there were also, again, a link to Ireland. Troubles in Dublin. Ireland Provisional Irish Republican Army member Thomas McMahon sentenced to life in prison for the assassination. Again, we have another assassination. Lord Mountbatten, linked to Saturn Conjunct, the North Node. Also doubtful who that was. You know, as Jim O'Doherty says, a bit odd that they left his security up to the incompetent Gardaí when MI5 could have done it. I think it was in Sligo, County Sligo in Ireland. Lord Mountbatten of Burma and 2 others killed in a bombing on his boat in the Republic of Ireland. Right, very interesting that. On that day, there was also an ambush killing 18 British soldiers. So in another link to Saddam Hussein this year, the Ba'ath Party purge. Iraqi President Saddam Hussein arranges the arrest and later execution of nearly 70 members of his ruling Ba'ath Party. Interesting. President Jimmy Carter addressed the nation in a televised speech about the crisis of confidence in America. Well, it's similar to now. And Iraqi President Hassan al-Bakr resigns as vice president and Saddam comes to power. So interesting, because how many times did Iraq and the Gulf War come up when we looked at Neptune and Saturn on the North Node? So what's going to happen in Iraq? Iran's government became... Also interesting, in Iran, their government became an Islamic republic by a 98% vote. So that gives another nod to something going on in Iran.